Okay, we're going to start. So I want to welcome you people to this talk on Mother's Flower Road to the Divine. The way Mother helps and guides us on our road to the Divine with her flowers. Mother saw the true essence of things. She saw beyond the outer physical forms of life. She saw that the essence of human life is always to become better, to always make progress. The need to progress is deep within everyone. It's more or less active in different persons for different reasons, but it's always there. And Mother said that whatever happens to us in our life, whether we think it's good or bad, is always to help us grow in consciousness. This essential need to progress in consciousness is the moving force behind the universe. If we ask, what does she mean by progressing in consciousness? What is it that we always become conscious of? The answer is that we become more and more conscious of our origin and our goal. Not only that, we grow more and more conscious of who and what we are. Of course, this brings up more questions. What is our origin? And what is our goal? And what are we? Mother explained that these three questions all have one answer. We are the consciousness of the Supreme All-Consciousness. This is our source. This is our origin. This is the goal of the need to progress. This fundamental need always moves us, whether we are aware of it or not. Our need to progress and how we get to the goal is our road to the divine. But not only do people have the essential need to progress, the earth we live on has the same need to progress. Every one of us expresses our need to progress in our own way, and the earth does the same. It has its own beautiful ways of expressing the universal need to progress. Mother saw that the earth produces flowers which express the universal need to progress in all its dimensions. The earth's flowers carry different aspects of the constant universal evolution into something better and higher, the evolution of going into the supreme consciousness. Like flowers, our physical bodies are made of the earth. Flowers express something that is part of us. Today it seems that there are more and more people who want to progress quickly. Mother and Sri Aurobindo came here for this. They brought valuable and precious wisdom, and they brought the teachings that show us how to progress more quickly. They teach a system which they call Sri Aurobindo's Yoga. And one of the most beautiful things that Mother taught is that we can learn how to progress and receive help for our progress from the earth's flowers doing Sri Aurobindo's Yoga. Each flower that grows from the earth expresses some aspect of evolving into the Supreme All-Consciousness, and it also has the energy of that particular expression. Mother taught that we can receive and assimilate that energy. Mother is a true guru. Mother is a universal guru. The word guru can mean just a teacher. For example, someone can say about their music teacher that he or she is their music guru. But a real guru is someone who has realized the divine. They have the Supreme All-Consciousness, and they are living in that divine consciousness. A true guru has the capacity to give their realization to a disciple and to lead their disciple on the road to the divine. Both Mother and Sri Aurobindo do this. They are true gurus. Sri Aurobindo explained that he and Mother had to try all ways and follow all methods to the divine because they were the leaders of the way in their particular work here. And the leaders of the way have to try all pathways so they can guide others. They teach their yoga out of their experience and out of their realizations. Mother's flower teachings is one beautiful method that she created for us, which explains a lot in the process of doing Sri Aurobindo's yoga. Her flower teachings are alive and accessible for everybody, just like flowers are alive and accessible for everybody. Mother is a universal guru because her teachings and the way that she teaches touches everyone and teaches something to everyone, even if they're not doing the yoga, even if they're not trying to realize the divine, even if they aren't really thinking about making progress. They learn. Her flower teachings are certainly a universal teaching, but they're also a teaching for the present-day world. Mother compared the use of the flower meanings which she discovered with the ancient Vedic teachings. She said, you can easily make speeches using flowers. For instance, I have noticed that this can effectively replace the ambiguous phraseology of the ancient initiations or the old Vedic languages, which no longer hold meaning for us. Flower language is much better because it contains the force and is extremely plastic. Since it is not formulated in words, each one is free to arrange and receive it according to his own capacity. You can make long speeches using flowers. Mother made up a flower game, which she played in the early days of the ashram with some of the early ashramites. They would all sit in a circle around her, and Mother would put some of her named flowers on a stool in front of her. She had made up a sentence using those flowers, and the ashramites had to make up their own sentence using Mother's flower names, those flower names that Mother put on the table, to make up their own sentence. Then they would bring it the next evening. Then, depending on how close their sentence came to Mother's sentence, Mother would award prizes to the first three. Here are three of Mother's sentences. We see a complete teaching in every sentence. First sentence. The flower names are peace in the vital, aspiration, and the beginning of realization. Mother's sentence is, through peace in the vital, aspire for the beginning of realization. Here's the second sentence. The flower names are humility and power. The sentence is, only to those who have true humility will power be given. And the third, the flower names are peace in the physical self, health, and transformation. This one we could probably guess pretty easy. The sentence is, peace in the physical cells leads first to health and then to transformation. It's a good example of why Mother said that you can make speeches using flowers. From time to time, Mother spoke about her own relationship with flowers and plants and trees. She once told the children a story about vegetables which spoke to her. She said, in Tokyo, I had a garden, and in this garden, I was growing vegetables myself. I had a fairly big garden and many vegetables. And so every morning I used to go for a walk after having watered them and all the rest. I used to walk around to choose which vegetables I would take for eating. Well, just imagine. There were some which said to me, no, 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 no. And then there were others which called. And I saw them from a distance. And they were saying, take me, take me, take me. So it was pretty simple. I looked for those which wanted to be taken, and never did I touch those which did not. I used to think it was something exceptional. I loved my plants very much. I used to look after them. I had put a lot of consciousness into them while watering them and cleaning them. So I thought they had a special capacity, perhaps. But in France, it was the same thing. I had a garden also in the south of France, where I used to grow peas, radishes, carrots. Well, there were some which were happy, those that asked to be taken. And there were those which said, no, 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 don't touch me, don't touch me. And then all the children in Mother's class started to laugh. And then one child asked, why did they say that, sweet Mother? And Mother said, well, I experimented precisely to find out, and the result was not always the same. At times it was indeed that the plant was not edible. It was not good. It was hard or bitter. It was not good for eating. At other times it happened that it was not ready, that it was too early. It wasn't ripe. By waiting for a day or two later it said to me, take me, take me, take me. Mother taught that flowers feel us and respond to us. The flowers and plants which were near Mother responded to her like children who grow and blossom in their mother's love and care. Flowers respond to Mother's photograph in a similar manner. Several people have reported that if they place flowers near Mother's photograph, soon the flower turns on its stalk. It turns away from the life-giving light of the sun in the room, and it faces Mother's image in the photograph. And I've seen that. I've actually seen flowers do that. Flowers also seem to become more beautiful when they're kept in front of Mother's photograph and in front of Sri Aurobindo's photograph. Mother also spoke of some flowers for healing. One day, when Sat Prem was recording Mother's statements for Mother's agenda, Sujata gave Mother a flower that Mother had recently named Material Power to Heal. Mother's comment about this flower is practical advice for the attitude we should have if we want to heal others and to heal ourselves. It's also the best advice we could have just to live our lives. Her comment for material power to heal is, demands a great sincerity in one's good will. When Sujata gave Mother this flower, Mother said, I would like it to be permanently established. When someone tells me I have a pain here, I pass my hand like that, and it's over. The hands feel. They feel it's possible. They are so conscious of the vibration. They feel that anything is possible. The other day, E fell down. I don't know how, and she injured her knee. She was covered with bruises and scratches, and she wore a dress that only reached down to here, so I saw. I said, what happened? She answered, I fell down. Then this hand, and Mother shows her right hand, quite spontaneously went and passed over her knee like that. And I felt all the vibrations at my fingertips. It's like needles, needles of light, and it vibrates and vibrates and vibrates. So I put my hand like that, and suddenly she said, oh, she was flabbergasted. All the pain had gone. But there were marks, bruises. They should go. But it takes time. On me, the effect is almost immediate, especially the right hand. But I would like it to have a sort of absoluteness, because the decision to intervene is not mental at all. Suddenly, the hand is simply compelled to do it, and so it does it. Many healing medications are made from flowers. We drink hot teas made from certain flowers and leaves when we have a cold. Usually they have a strong smell. In her agenda, Mother spoke about this. And she also said that the fragrance of the flowers communicated a lot of their meaning to her. On February 4th, 1961, as soon as Satprem came in, Mother said to him, "Here, I have brought you 2 flowers. They have 2 very different, yet typically Indian fragrances. This one is straightforwardness, and this is simplicity. I've always found that this one has a cleansing fragrance." Then Mother holds out the simplicity flower to show it to Satprem. And she says, "When you breathe it, everything becomes clean. It's wonderful." And Mother breathes in the fragrance of the flower. "Once I cured myself of the onset of a cold with it. This can be done when you catch it right at the very beginning. It fills you completely, the nose, the throat. And this one, straightforwardness, is right at the other end of the spectrum. I find it very powerful. Strange, isn't it?" Mother's comment for straightforwardness is, shows itself as it is, without compromising. And Satprem says, "It's not at all sweet smelling." And Mother responds, "Oh no, it's quite strong. It's largely the fragrances that have made me give flowers their significance." I find these studies quite interesting. It corresponds to something really true in nature. Once, without telling me anything, someone brought me a sprig of tulsi, sweet basil. I smelled it and I said, "Oh, devotion." It was absolutely a vibration of devotion. Afterwards, I was told it's a plant of devotion to Krishna, consecrated to Krishna. Another time, I was brought one of those big flowers, which are not really flowers, somewhat resembling corn, with long, very strongly scented stalks. I smelled it, and I said, "Ascetic purity, just like that, from the odor alone." Later, I was told that it is Shiva's flower when he is doing tapasya. These people have an age-old knowledge, the ancient Vedic knowledge, which they have preserved. In other words, it is something concretely true. It doesn't depend at all on the mind, or on thought, or even on feelings. It's a vibration. Now, it seems that Mother has an ascetic purity flower there. She doesn't say so, but Satprem asks, "What about this flower, this long corn-like stalk?" And Mother answers, "Yes, this flower is Shiva, doing his tapasya." And interestingly enough, its smell is fantastically attractive to snakes. It makes them come from far away to nest in the shrubs. And as you know, the serpent is the power of evolution. It is Shiva's own creature. He always puts them on his head and around his neck, because they symbolize the power of evolution and transformation. So spiritual perfume is Shiva's tapasya. Sri Aurobindo defines tapasya as a concentration of will or energy to control the nature and rigorous discipline. He also calls it physical austerity. He said, when the will and energy are concentrated and used to control the mind, vital and physical, and change them or bring down the consciousness, or for any other yogic purpose or high purpose, that is called tapasya. Mother's comment for the flower she named tapasya is a discipline with the aim of realizing the divine. We have to do tapasya in our mental being, our vital being, and our physical being for the full result of Sri Aurobindo's yoga. Mother's comment on the flower she named mental tapasya is the process leading to the goal. Her comment on the flower vital tapasya is, the vital undergoes a rigorous discipline in order to transform itself. For the flower integral tapasya, Mother said, the whole being lives only to know and serve the divine. All of what Sri Aurobindo wrote here is said in Mother's flower names and her comments. Later, Mother changed the name of the flower that she called ascetic purity. She gave it a name of spiritual perfume. So if you want to see the flower, you can find it in the flower book as spiritual perfume. And her comment is, has an extraordinary power of attraction. And finally, we have the ultimate in the flower that Mother named perfect tapasya. Her comment is, that will reach its goal. The tapasya flower grows on a plant which is part of the species Datura. Datura is used in Western traditional medicine and in Ayurveda to treat a variety of ailments. But every part of the plant is poisonous. Even if someone touches it, even if they touch it, they get some reaction in their body. Eating too much of any part of it can cause death. In the early days of the American West, the cowboys herded cattle on the wide open plains where the tapasya flower grew wild everywhere. Sometimes a cow would eat the tapasya flower, and then it would act so strangely that the cowboys thought it had gone crazy. But the cows did not die, they just acted crazy. The plant was called Jimson weed, but the cowboys called this plant loco weed. The large state of Texas was the place where people bred large herds of cattle and ran them out on the open plains. Texas is next to Mexico, where people speak Spanish. So loco is the Spanish word for crazy. The common name for this flower was devil's trumpet. I remember loco weed and crazy cows from all the cowboy television programs when I was a child. And I see American people smiling in the audience. A friend of mine reminded me of a song by the famous singing cowboy Gene Autry. He sings a song called Back in the Saddle Again. Remember that? This is the first verse. I'm back in the saddle again, out where a friend is a friend, where the longhorn cattle feed on the lowly Jimson weed. I'm back in the saddle again. In those days, all the children knew that song. I knew that song. And sometimes we would sing it along with Gene Autry on TV. Now, because of these memories, which were so close to my own life, I decided to research Datura on the internet. I wanted to learn more about what Mother saw in the tapasya flower. My research brought some really interesting facts. Eating a certain amount of Datura causes hallucinations because it contains tropane alkaloids. These have psychotropic, mind-altering effects. Wikipedia reports that Datura has enthogens, which induce alterations in perception, mood, consciousness, or behavior for spiritual development. It was used in many cultures to cause intense sacred or occult visions for religious, magical, or shamanic purposes. They use the drugs to communicate with the elemental vital beings who act in nature, perhaps to ask for rain or for some other natural phenomenon for their people. Mother teaches that hallucinations or visions usually come because our consciousness opens to the vital planes and we see something on the vital planes. Opening to other planes also comes from doing yoga. Sometimes it's just a picture we have in our consciousness, but most often our visions come from some inner plane. This brings up an interesting question about these cows. Is it possible that eating a tapasya flower, don't laugh, opened the cow's inner awareness to some aspect of the lower vital plane, where they saw vital beings? And this brings up an interesting idea. Did the cows actually choose to eat the tapasya flowers? Animals have a natural instinct to avoid eating harmful plants. If lots of cows in America were making a mistake and eating a datura flower that killed them, then a lot of cows would have died. It would have been well known. But it was only reported that the cows acted crazy. So, did the datura put the cows into an altered state of consciousness? Did the cows have hallucinations? There has to be some reason why these animals deliberately ate a plant that could kill it if they ate too much of it. Man has used datura for centuries as a mind-altering drug. Indian sadhus and burial ground sadhus who meditate at the burning ghats use datura in their sadhana. The common name of datura comes from India, and it is called datura here today. It is favored by devotees of Lord Shiva. It is offered to Lord Shiva to get rid of the poisons of envy, ego, rivalry, foul language, and wicked nature, so that one is cleansed of all his sins and becomes pure. Mother sensed that all of this is in the tapasya flower. Psychotropic drugs often open up our consciousness to memories which we've hidden away inside us because they were too painful or frightening to face. These hidden memories go on affecting us unconsciously until we uncover them and process them. Or the drugs bring out something in our own nature which isn't very nice, but we have denied and we have avoided dealing with. But it is an active part of our personality just the same. It also sounds like these mind-altering drugs made people feel they're losing their sense of ego, and they might not be ready for the experience. Our individual ego is what we believe we are until we are developed enough to get rid of our ego. Mother teaches that we have to have an ego to form our separate individuality. When its work is over in our being, then it is time for us to get rid of our ego, but not before. Sri Aurobindo has a saying, the ego is the helper, the ego is the bar. Somebody whose ego is still unformed could become frightened if they are faced with an experience that takes their ego away. When a person is under the influence of a chemical mind-altering substance, they have to go through the experience until the drug wears off. And this can be terrifying. If a person is spiritually developed, a drug-induced experience can help them to go through negative things and purify their nature of the so-called poisons, like ego and wicked nature and envy, that the Indian sadhus got rid of with the datura. All the tapasya flowers, which Mother named, come from a common weed which grows close to the earth. The flowers are near the ground, except for perfect tapasya. This one is a hanging white flower, very beautiful. It is not called devil's trumpet like the other ones. It is called angel's trumpet. And we can see that Mother's names are absolutely accurate. I'm sure that we could look up every flower she named and find information about it which would show us how accurate every one of her flower names is. Mother was very conscious of other things in our natural environment which work for our evolution. This year, we had a monsoon which broke past records for rain. We're fortunate to have Mother's explanation of what the rain does in the context of our evolution. This explanation is in an unpublished letter. You won't find it in the books. She wrote, "The rain, it is like a grace that God sends to bless the earth and to purify it. It is this that gives life to nature and the animals. It has an extraordinary power of purification. As soon as the rain comes down, it purifies the atmosphere of all the negative formations that we try to throw in the air and the harmful forces that constantly destroy us. It makes the atmosphere clear and limpid, and in a way, cleanses the atmosphere of all impurities. There are also the hostile forces who live in the atmosphere, and they are afraid of water. And as soon as it rains, they flee, and if they cannot, they are dissolved. That is why there is sort of a peace that is established after the rain. The rain is for one who wants to purify himself. It washes you of your defects, your errors, and your impurities. The rain has the power to purify the earth, the atmosphere, and the people living in it. But one must keep oneself open without the slightest fear, the fear of catching cold or falling sick. If we keep ourselves open to the vast above us and let the rain purify us, then there is a concrete result. When we learn what Mother was conscious of, it makes good sense to enter the world which Mother lived in, to learn all these things. There is no end to becoming, and there's so very much that we can become. If we want to do this more quickly, we can follow Mother's and Sri Aurobindo's way of dedicated yoga practice, which now so beautifully includes working with the flowers of the earth. We can live in Mother's world of flowers and accept and use the earth's flowers the way Mother did. They have a lot to give that we can receive and learn from. There are many ways to do this. The ashram has published books with Mother's named flowers and her comments on their spiritual evolutionary meanings. There is a 2-volume set of books called The Mother, The Spiritual Significance of Flowers. It lists 898 flowers, and it has beautiful photos of most of them. There is also a website called Blossom Like a Flower, which lists over 900 flowers with their photographs. There we can find information that we need. Each meaning contains a spiritual guidance which automatically fits into our lives. Simply reading Mother's names of flowers opens up some new understanding and consciousness in us. Reading her comments increases this. If we meditate on the meaning of Mother's flower names and her comments, more meanings come for our daily life. We also have the flower cards. The flower cards were first made by Mother. She made them for some ashram children to play games with. But we have the set of flower cards made by Prisma. They researched all the flowers that Mother gave to the ashramites in the early days and put them in their set of flower cards. Some people make themselves a system to use the flower cards to receive flowers from Mother every day, just as though they were in the ashram, going to Mother for her help and guidance. Here is an example of the result of meditating on Mother's flower meanings. Mother named a flower No Quarrels. No fighting with other people. No quarrels. Her comment is, a very important condition to fulfill in order to facilitate the advent of the supermind. It sounds very straightforward. It sounds fairly simple. But there is a lot to the idea of no quarrels. I'm giving you an example from my own experience. I read this in the flower book. I saw it in the flower cards, and I thought, yeah, I can do this one. I will remember. I will not quarrel with anybody anymore when I see them. But then I thought about it when I was alone at home, and suddenly I found I was quarreling with the same people in my mind. I was still quarreling. Not only that, when I was cleaning my house, I was quarreling with the dirt. I was quarreling with the broom. I was quarreling with the furniture. And then the quarreling part of my vital being was sneaking in when I went to bed at night. I was quarreling with the bed sheets. And how about quarreling with nature? Sometimes I'm doing that too. And what about time? I quarrel with time all the time, which is a pretty stupid thing to do. I can't change time. I have to work with time. I have to figure out how to use time for my own advantage. Worst of all, I found that I was quarreling with myself all the time. But it was so buried in my own favorable view of myself that I never saw it. And I'm sure that I'm going to add many more quarrels to my own list. Finally, Mother says that any and all of our quarrels are actually quarreling with the divine. We can also look at no quarrels as saying, don't judge other people. The earth has given us a flower that Mother saw expressed the quality of the pathway of our evolution. She called it Road to the Divine. Her explanation of the name is always long, apparently dry at times, but always abundant in its results. Mother was speaking from direct experience, as well as about what she perceived as the spiritual essence of this flower. Mother and Sri Aurobindo were familiar with so many roads to the divine. They designed their own particular road to the divine for us, and they explained what we have to do to travel on their road to the divine. We have to work on our mental, our vital, and our physical. We can start with our mind. Each flower, and also Mother's comment, is a teaching. She named one flower Mind. Mother's teaching comment about the flower she calls Mind is, its true value depends on its surrender to the divine. We have a flower named Awakening in the Mind. Mother's teaching is, let it turn to the light, and to the light alone. This gives us another practice to follow. We have to make the minute-by-minute choice to turn to the light, and to the light alone. There is a flower named Perfect Working of the Mind. Mother says, can take place when the mind is determined exclusively to fulfill its role. Mother told the ashram students, the true role of the mind is a formative role in relation to action. An idea enters the mind, seizes it, and gives it a form to realize it, changes it into a motive of action, and sends it out towards the material field. The mind organizes the idea so that it may be realized in action. This is its true role, And so long as it does that, and does it with care, it fulfills its role. It abides in its place, and it is quite useful. But if the mind imagines that it knows, that it has no need of receiving knowledge and ideas from another part of the being, a higher part, if it imagines that it knows, and by the association of inner movements believes that it has found some knowledge, which can never be but a reflection of something else, and if it wants to impose this knowledge upon the physical life, then it leaves its role and becomes a tyrant. This happens quite often to it. It then becomes completely perverted, and instead of helping the sadhana, brings it down. You can easily make this observation. Naturally, one must be able to follow the true workings, the activities within oneself. This is a really helpful thing to know when we want to quiet our mind. Mother told the ashram students that they could keep their mind quiet by focusing their attention upward and feeling that their mind was a mirror. Then they could see the light of an idea coming into their mind from above. If they did not try to put words to the idea, that idea, they could actually watch it come down and take on words from the mind's own storehouse of ideas. Mother named a flower Clear Mind. Her comment is the first step on the way to conversion. Sri Aurobindo spoke about the clear mind. He said, ordinarily, the mind reflects the status of mortal nature and the activities of the force which work under the conditions of nature. But if the mind becomes clear, passive, pure, by the renunciation of these activities and the renunciation of the characteristic ideas and outlook of mental nature, then, as in a clear mirror, or like the sky in clear water, which is without ripple and is unruffled by winds, the divine is reflected. This is why we want to have a clear mind. Then it can do its proper job of receiving from above and forming what we need for action. Unfortunately, Mother did not teach in detail about most of the particular flower names. But we are fortunate to have one, which is a really full and comprehensive guidance. This is a flower called Mental Honesty. It's very helpful. Her comment is, does not try to deceive others, nor try to deceive itself. In one of her school classes, a student asked, "Sweet Mother, what does mental honesty mean exactly?" And Mother said, "It is a mind that does not attempt to deceive itself. And in fact, it is not an attempt, for it succeeds very well in doing it. It would seem that in the ordinary psychological constitution of man, the almost constant function of the mind is to give an acceptable explanation of what goes on in the desire being, the vital, the most material parts of the mind, and the subtlest parts of the body. There is a kind of general complicity in all the parts of the being to give an explanation and a comfortable justification for everything we do. And we do this in order to avoid, as far as possible, the painful impressions left by the mistakes we commit and the undesirable movements we make. For instance, unless one has undergone or taken up a special training, whatever one does, the mind gives itself a favorable enough explanation of it so that one is not troubled. Only under the pressure of outer reactions or circumstances or movements coming from other people does one gradually consent to look less favorably at what one is and does. And then one begins to ask oneself whether things could not be better than they are. Spontaneously, the first movement is what is known as self-defense. One puts oneself on one's guard, and quite spontaneously, one wants a justification. And for the smallest things, absolutely insignificant things. It is a normal attitude in life. And explanations, one gives them to oneself. It is only under the pressure of circumstances that one begins to give them to others or to another. But first, one makes oneself very comfortable. First thing, it was like that, for it had to be like that. And it happened because of this. And it is always the fault of circumstances or other people. And truly, it requires an effort, unless, as I say, one has undergone a discipline, has acquired the habit of doing it automatically. It requires an effort to begin to understand that perhaps things are not like this, that perhaps one has not done exactly what one ought to have done, or reacted as one should. And even when one begins to see it, a much greater effort is needed to recognize it officially. When one begins to see that one has made a mistake, the first movement of the mind is to push it into the background and to put a cloak in front of it, the cloak of a very fine little explanation. And as long as one is not obliged to show it, one hides it. And this is what I call lack of mental honesty. First, one deceives oneself by habit. But even when one begins not to deceive oneself, instinctively there is a movement of trying to deceive oneself in order to feel comfortable. And so, a still greater step is necessary once one has understood that one was deceiving oneself, to confess frankly, yes, I was deceiving myself. All these things are so habitual, so automatic, as it were, that you are not even aware of them. But when you begin to want to establish some discipline over your being, you make discoveries that are really interesting. When you have discovered this, you become aware that you are living constantly in the best word is self-deception, a state of willful deceit. That is, you deceive yourself spontaneously. It is not that you need to reflect. Spontaneously, you put a pretty cloak over what you have done so that it doesn't show its true colors. And all this for things which are so insignificant, which have so little importance. It would be understandable, wouldn't it, if recognizing your mistake had serious consequences for your very existence. The instinct of self-preservation would make you do it as a protection, but that is not the question. It concerns things which are absolutely unimportant, of no consequence at all, except that of having to tell yourself, I have made a mistake. This means an effort is needed in order to be mentally sincere. There must be an effort. There must be a discipline. Of course, I'm not speaking of those who tell lies in order not to be caught, for everybody knows that this should not be done. Besides, the most stupid lies are the most useless, for they are so flagrant they can't deceive anyone. Such examples occur constantly. You catch someone doing something wrong. You tell him, that's how it is. He gives a silly explanation which nobody can understand, nobody can accept. It is silly, but he gives it in the hope of shielding himself. It is spontaneous, you see, but he knows this is not done. But the other kind of deception is much more spontaneous, and it is so habitual that one is not aware of it. So when we speak of mental honesty, we speak of something which is acquired by a very constant and sustained effort. It's clear that mental honesty has to be a daily practice on Mother's flower road to the divine. Not only that, if we can get to the point where our mind is only receiving ideas from the higher part of our being and forming them and putting them out for action, there won't be any issue of mental honesty. Or we can approach it from the opposite direction. We can work on mental honesty, and then our mind will adjust itself to being quiet. Then it will recognize the true ideas which should move us. It will learn to use these ideas instead of its own ideas. Spiritual seekers have been trying to have a silent mind for untold centuries. Mother named a flower Aspiration for Silence in the Mind. She has a most interesting comment for this one. Perhaps it is a humorous statement, because it is so incredibly difficult to silence the mind. Mother's comment is, too noisy to be effective. But, you know, it makes us think about how we aspire. Are we using our mind to make it stop its own workings? That's not going to work. If we are, it has to be done another way. We have to constantly call Mother's divine force and ask her to do this work. If we look at flowers that contain teaching on how to silence our mind, we can start with the flower that Mother named Mental Surrender. It is a beautiful yellow and orange rose. Mother's comment shows us the true function of a quiet mind. She said, occurs when the mind has understood that it is only an instrument. This gives us the result. But how do we get there? We've just seen how the mind wants to depart from its true role of organizing the information it receives. Along these lines, we have a flower that Mother called Mental Voice. Her comment is, the mind must learn to express only what is dictated by the divine. We have to try to do this. We have to work on becoming peaceful so that we receive what is always coming from above, and we have to learn to recognize it. We are tempted by a flower that Mother calls Quiet Mind. Her comment is, the best way to learn. We all have so much to learn. Then we have Mental Purity. Mother says it is a mirror which does not distort. This is the clear mind that can receive properly from above. Then there is integral mental purity, about which Mother says, silent, attentive, receptive, concentrated on the path of the divine. This is the path of purity. This is probably one of the best ways to travel on Mother's road to the divine, being silent and attentive and receptive and concentrated on the divine. When we have this, we have reached the essence of the flower that Mother calls purified mind. Her comment is, ready to surrender to the divine. There is a flower called integrally pure thoughts. Mother's comment is, an effect of divine grace. These few words speak volumes of teachings. Maybe we don't know how to quiet our mind, but we can make it a practice to stay concentrated and receptive to the divine, and do our best to think pure thoughts about everything. These efforts will make us more peaceful. When we are peaceful, we automatically allow the divine grace to quiet our mind. Mother has explained that the grace is always here, always working, and always accessible, even if we are not conscious of it. There are a lot more flowers with teachings about the mind. But now we're going to travel on the road to the divine with some of the flower teachings about the vital being. We will leave the plane of our mental being by just one more flower. It teaches about the future of our mind. It is supramentalized mind. Mother's comment is, mind has become an instrument for transformation. Sri Aurobindo wrote, for mind is, in its origin, a principle of light, an instrument put forth from the supermind, and though set to work within limits, and even set to create limits, yet the limits are luminous borders for a special working, voluntary and purposive bounds, a service of the finite, ever extending itself under the eye of infinity. In this character of mind, this is the mind that will reveal itself under the touch of supermind and make all human mentality an adjunct and a minor instrumentation of the supramental knowledge. There are many flower teachings about how to deal with our vital being on Mother's flower road to the divine. Mother explained that our vital being is the place of our willpower. Therefore, it always wants to go its own way. And for this reason, our vital is the last to change when we do the yoga. But we can't just get rid of it. It is part of us. In one of Mother's very early talks to some ashramites, somebody asked, is our vital being to take part in the divine love? If it does, what is the right and correct form of participation that it should take? And Mother responded, where is the manifestation of divine love intended to stop? Is it to be confined to some unreal or immaterial region? Divine love plunges its manifestation upon earth down into the most material matter. It does not indeed find itself in the selfish distortions of the human consciousness, but the vital in itself is as important an element in divine love as it is in the whole of the manifested universe. There is no possibility of movement and progress without the mediation of the vital. But because this power of nature has been so badly distorted, some prefer to believe that it has to be pulled out altogether and thrown away. But it is only through the vital that matter can be touched by the transforming power of the Spirit. If the vital is not there to infuse its dynamism and living force, matter will remain dead. For the higher parts of the being will not come in contact with the earth, will not be concretized in life, and they will depart unsatisfied and disappear. It is the energy of the vital that enters into dull and insensitive matter and makes it responsive and alive. But the adverse forces have distorted it, and they have turned it into a field of violence and selfishness and desire and every kind of ugliness, and prevented it from taking part in the divine work. The one thing to be done is to change it, not to suppress its movement or destroy it. For without it, no intensity is possible. The vital in its very nature is that in us which can give itself away. The vital itself has to decide that there is a better way to be than the distorted and twisted way that Mother has just described. Mother has said that the only way to change the vital is to convert it. But the nature of our vital being is so independent that it has to agree to change. It has to decide for itself. We can't force it. In one of the classes, a student asked, "Can't the vital be converted?" And Mother said, "Convert the vital? Surely one can. It is a difficult task, but it can be done. If it could not be done, then there would be no hope. But generally, the mind is not sufficient. For I have known many people who could see very clearly, understand very well, were mentally thoroughly convinced, could even describe to you and tell you extraordinary things, could easily give excellent lessons to others, but their vital was up to all sorts of tricks and would not listen at all to what they had to say. It said, 'It's all the same to me. Say what you may. As for myself, I go my own way.' It is only when contact with the psychic has been established that this can convert anything at all, even the worst criminal, in a moment. These are those illuminations which seize you and turn you inside out completely. After that, all goes well. There may be slight difficulties of adjustment, but still, things go well. A converted vital is an all-powerful instrument. It's difficult to regulate it, yet naturally, when you have succeeded in taming it, you have something powerful in hand for realization. The first main step in Sri Aurobindo's yoga is to have our psychic soul consciousness in every part of us, including our body. Our body is the final stronghold of inertia and ignorance. It takes a long time to respond to the efforts to make it conscious. Mother says that our vital being is the instrument which can do it best and do it most quickly. She says, naturally, it is very difficult to establish a contact between the most external physical consciousness and the psychic soul consciousness. And the physical consciousness has plenty of goodwill. It is very regular. It tries a great deal, but it is slow and heavy. It takes long. It is difficult to move it. It does not get tired, but it makes no effort. It goes its way quietly. It can take centuries to put the external consciousness in contact with the inmost psychic soul consciousness. But if for some reason or other the vital takes a hand in it, a passion seizes it. It wants this contact for some reason or other, which is not always a spiritual reason, but it wants this contact. It wants it with all its energy. It wants it with all its strength, all its passion, all its fervor. In 3 months, the thing is done. And if you succeed in convincing it in some way or other, then you will advance with giant strides on the path. We need to convert our vital. It's clear that we have to convince our vital being to want to go with us on Mother's flower road to the divine. Sri Aurobindo wrote that we have a true vital being and a true mental being and a true physical being. About the vital, he wrote, the true vital being is a wide, vast, calm, strong being without limitations, firm and immovable, capable of all power, all knowledge, all ananda, delight. It is, moreover, without ego, for it knows itself to be a projection and instrument of the divine. It is the divine warrior, pure and perfect. In it is an instrumental force for all divine realizations. The one thing needed for the sadhana is peace, calm, especially in the vital. A peace which depends not on the circumstances or surroundings, but on the inner contact with a higher consciousness, which is the consciousness of the Divine Mother. If you get peace, then to clean the vital is easy. If you simply clean and do nothing else, you go very slowly, for the vital gets dirty again and has to be cleaned 100 times. The peace is something that is clean in itself. So to get it is a positive way of securing your object. To look for dirt is only a negative way. Mother named a flower Peace in the Vital. Her comment is the result of the abolition of desires. This tells us everything. She also has a flower named Vital Purity. Her comment is, it begins with the abolition of desires. It's just like the effort to quiet our mind. People have tried for centuries to quiet the vital without getting results. People have devised all sorts of ways to abolish desire. They've tried by mortifying the body, by having a sense of shame, or by threats of hell fire after death, just to name a few. The yogic solution for those who practice in Sri Aurobindo's yoga is always the same. It is to always surrender to the divine force, which Sri Aurobindo calls here the Divine Mother's consciousness. It will do all the work in us. Mother's comment for the flower she named Surrender should be a part of our vital practice of surrender. Her comment is, to will what the divine wills is the supreme wisdom. Mother tells us more about the result of the abolition of desire in the vital in her comment about a flower she calls opening of the vital to the divine love. She commented, it is no longer the ego that governs, but the divine. Sri Aurobindo writes about what happens when the vital does this. He writes, it is a mistake to believe that if the vital loves, it must be a love that demands and imposes the satisfaction of its desire. It is a mistake to think that it must be that, or else the vital, in order to escape from its attachment, must draw away altogether from the object of its love. The vital can be as absolute and unquestioning in its self-giving as any other part of the nature. Nothing can be more generous than its movement when it forgets self for the beloved. Mother taught that true love, coming from our most divine part, our soul, always gives. It only wants to give. It never wants to take. When our vital agrees to be converted, it agrees to be governed by our soul. Then it loves with the true love of the soul. Mother explained a little more about how our vital being acts when it has traveled far on her road to the divine. Her explanation makes us want to purify our vital being. In case we're a little fed up with our vital being, so to say, with all the hard sadhana that we have to do and all the difficulties that we have, we can always remind ourselves of this. Mother said, the converted vital feels also a joy in the progress of realization. All the difficulties implied in that process, it accepts with gusto. It never feels happier than when the truth is shown it, and the play of falsehood in its lower nature is laid bare. It does not do the yoga as if carrying a burden on its back, but as if it were a very pleasurable occupation. It is willing to endure the utmost with a smile, if it is a condition of the transformation. Neither complaining nor grumbling, it endures happily, because it is for the sake of the divine that it does so. It has the unshakable conviction that the victory will be won. Never for an instant does it vacillate in its belief that the mighty work of change taken up by Sri Aurobindo is going to culminate in success. For that, indeed, is a fact. There is not a shadow of a doubt as to the issue of the work we have in hand. It is no mere experiment, but an inevitable manifestation of the supramental. The converted vital has a prescience of the victory. It keeps up a will towards progress which never turns its back. It feels full of the energy which is born of its certitude about the triumph of the divine, whom it is aware of always in itself as doing whatever is necessary and infusing in it the unfaltering power to resist and finally conquer its enemies. Why should it despair or complain? The transformation is going to be. Nothing will ever stop it. Nothing will frustrate the decree of the omnipotent. Cast away, therefore, all diffidence and weakness, and resolve to endure bravely a while before the great day arrives when the long battle turns into an everlasting victory. Mother named a flower consent of the vital. Her comment tells us how we should feel when our vital has consented. She said, friendly, smiling, always ready for action with a great goodwill. We have a flower she called goodwill. Her comment is a whole teaching about what true goodwill is. It says a lot about how much change will have occurred in our vital also when it has consented. It is modest in appearance, does not make a show, but is always ready to be useful. There is more teaching in a flower called enthusiastic vital consent. Mother commented, here all the resources of its enthusiasm are placed at the service of its consent. Then we have a flower called correct movement in the vital. Mother's comment is, at once the cause and the result of conversion. It is both the means and the goal. Here's another goal. It is the flower Mother called vital patience. She commented, indispensable for all progress. We have to work on being patient. Now we've got a good idea about the differences between our mind and our vital, and the different yogic work in the mind and the vital. When we see what Mother says about the work that has to be done in the physical, we will see that it is something completely different from either the mind or the vital. We saw that the mind prefers to have its own idea about what it should do. Instead of receiving its ideas from the true source and giving them a form and changing them into motives for actions, it imagines that it knows, so it makes up its own ideas. It's almost impossible to control. The vital is even more independent. It has its own will, which it likes to use. Therefore, it has to agree to change. Both of these parts of our being actively resist the divine consciousness because they want to do their own thing. But our body does not do these things at all. Its resistance is automatically in the inertia and unconsciousness of its own substance. Physical matter is the final end of the descent of the divine all-consciousness into manifestation. Therefore, our body is the least conscious part of us. Not only that, our body has automatically taken in a lot from the mind and the vital. And it has automatically and unconsciously reacted. This happens also with the things coming into our mind and vital from the outside. Our body is made up of what it has received in this way, and it is also made up of its own reactions to what it has received. All of this has to be purified so the body can receive the divine consciousness which will transform it. Mother did the yoga of the body. She spoke of the consciousness of her cells out of her personal experiences. In Mother's agenda, she spoke about how she discovered that her cells were happy in their own right, and that once they understood that they should receive the new force, they were very willing to cooperate. The cells had their own joy and a beautiful consciousness, but it was all deformed by what had been done to the physical body by the ignorant mind and vital. Buried in our body, under all this, there is a love for the divine. Mother named a flower, love in the physical for the divine. Her comment was, modest in appearance, but tenacious and charming, does not make a fuss, but is very faithful. She named a flower, attachment of the cells to the divine. Her comment is, they know how to expect everything from him. She said, at the center of every cell lies the divine consciousness. By aspiration and repeated self-giving, the cells must be made transparent. In one of Mother's classes, the subject she gave for meditation was a question: how to awaken in the body an aspiration for the divine. In the next class, a child asked her how to do it. Mother said, when one is very young, and as I say, well born, that is, born with a conscious psychic being within, there is always, in the dreams of a child, a kind of aspiration which, for its child's consciousness, is a sort of ambition for something which would be beauty without ugliness, justice without injustice, goodness without limits, and a conscious, constant success, a perpetual miracle. One dreams of miracles when one is young. One wants all wickedness to disappear, everything to be always luminous, beautiful, happy. One likes stories which end happily. This is what one should rely on. When the body feels its miseries, its limitations, one must establish this dream in it, of a strength which would have no limit, a beauty which would have no ugliness, and of marvelous capacities. One dreams of being able to rise into the air, of being wherever it is necessary to be, of setting things right when they go wrong, of healing the sick. Indeed, one has all sorts of dreams when one is young. Usually, parents or teachers spend their time throwing cold water on it, saying, "Oh, it's a dream. This is not a reality." They should do the opposite. Children should be taught, yes, this is what you must try to realize. And not only is it possible, but it is certain if you come in contact with the part in you which is capable of doing this thing. This is what should guide your life, organize it, make you develop in the direction of the true reality, which the ordinary world calls illusion. And if you did this when you are very small, you have much less difficulty than if later on you have to undo all the bad effects of a bad education, undo that kind of dull and vulgar common sense, which means that you expect nothing good from life, which makes it insipid, boring, and contradicts all the hopes, all the so-called illusions of beauty. Then faith awakens in the cells of the body, and you will see that you find a response in your body itself. The body itself will feel that if its inner will helps, fortifies, directs, leads, well, all its limitations will gradually disappear. And so, when the first experience comes, which sometimes begins when one is very young, the first contact with the inner joy, the inner beauty, the inner light, the first contact with that which suddenly makes you feel, oh, that is what I want. You must cultivate it. Never forget it. Hold it constantly before you. Tell yourself, I have felt it once. I can feel it again. This has been real for me, even for the space of a second. And that is what I am going to revive in myself. And then you must encourage the body to seek it with the confidence that it carries the possibility within itself, and that if it calls for it, it will come back. It will be realized again. When one is normal, that is to say, unspoiled by bad teaching and bad example, when one is born and lives in a healthy and relatively balanced and normal environment, the body, spontaneously, without any need for one to intervene mentally or even vitally, has the certitude that even if something goes wrong, it will be cured. The body carries within itself the certitude of cure, the certitude that illness or disorder is sure to disappear. It is only through the false education from the environment that gradually the body is taught that there are incurable diseases, irreparable accidents, and that it can grow old, and all these stories which destroy its faith and trust. But normally, the body of a normal child, the body, I'm not speaking of the thought, the body itself feels when something goes wrong that it will certainly be all right again. The body carries within itself the sense of its divinity. There, this is what you must try to find again in yourself if you have lost it. Mother spoke about talking to her own cells as though they were children. She said that when she explained things this way, they understood her, and her cells responded favorably. Our physical body has its own spiritual aspirations. Mother named a flower aspiration in the physical. Her comment was manifold, simple, and joyous. There is a flower called spiritual aspiration in the physical. Mother commented, comes in to counteract and overcome resistances which cannot succeed in making it give up. we have seen where the resistances come from. In our ignorance, we have automatically made our own bad habits in our own bodies. And we have deformed our bodies by unknowingly making them do things which hurt them. The resistances in our body are because it holds things like pain and fear and anger coming from centuries of universal mistreatment of bodies. Because the body has to receive the new force and our physical consciousness has to change, Mother placed great emphasis on physical education in the ashram school and also for the ashramites. In one of her classes, she was explaining to the students how to be a leader. And in this context, she spoke about the necessity of not being a slave to the body. She said, generally, those who are against this outer discipline of sports, this concentration on material realization, are people who completely lack control over their physical being. And to realize the integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo, the control of one's body, is the first indispensable step. Those who despise physical activities are people who won't be able to take a single step on the true path of integral yoga unless they first get rid of their contempt. Control of the body in all its forms is an indispensable basis. A body which dominates you is an enemy. It is a disorder that you cannot accept. It is the enlightened will in the mind which should govern the body, and not the body which should impose its law on the mind. When one knows that a thing is bad, one must be capable of not doing it. When one wants something to be realized, one must be able to do it, and not be stopped at every step by the body's inability or ill will or lack of collaboration. And for that, one must follow a physical discipline and become master in one's own home. It is very fine to escape into meditation and from the heights of one's so-called grandeur look down on material things. But one who is not master in his own home is a slave. Our sadhana in the body is another long and hard work. Mother named a flower promise of realization in the physical. Her comment is courage to face the long road. She named another flower promise of realization in matter. She commented, the best encouragement for doing what is necessary. Mother said that the best method of dealing with our physical matter is to consciously put light in it. This is a work that we have to discipline ourselves to do often. She named a flower light in the cells. Her comment is the first step towards purity in the cells. She said, there comes a moment when the body itself finds that there is nothing to do in the world which is so worth living for as this transformation. And that there is nothing which can have so great an interest as this passionate interest of transformation. It is as though all the cells of the body were athirst for this light which wants to manifest. They cry out for it. They find intense joy in it, and they are sure of the victory. There are many, many more flowers that Mother named, and each one contains a teaching for us. But we have to stop here, now that we've made a good beginning on Mother's flower road to the divine. We're going to end with a flower promise, a flower promise of divine, never-ending help. It is the flower that Mother named Divine Solicitude. Her comment is, always active, even when we do not perceive it. In one of her classes, she explained what solicitude is. She said, it is care, that is, attention, help, concern, precisely the concern to help and to do good. This is solicitude. When you feel solicitude for someone, you find out his needs. You try to satisfy them. You have good thoughts, good feelings. You want to help, support, make him happy. This is solicitude. And this describes the promise that is in the flower divine solicitude. So, that's all. There's time for a few questions if anybody has a question. I guess not. If there are no questions, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.